So our next speaker is Shri Jayant Patil. He's the member of Executive Committee of Management, and he's an advisor to the CMD of Larsen Toubro. He's a seasoned professional with over 40 years of experience at L&T. He has served there as a whole-time director for defense and smart technologies and is currently on an advisor for L&T's precision engineering systems and semiconductor businesses. He is an IIT Mumbai alumnus. He holds leadership positions including chairman of L&T MBDA Missile Systems. He's a board member of L&T Semiconductor Technologies, and he's also the founder chairperson of Indian Space Association. He has received several awards and accolades, including the Distinguished Alumnus Award from IIT Mumbai or Bombay. He's an honorary fellow from PMA Bharat, and he's been recognized as one of the top 100 great IITians for his contributions to our country, Bharat's development. Thank you.
Thank you, Nachiketa ji, for that introduction. As I begin, let me tell you, the theme which I am going to be speaking is primarily on export of defense. Now, defense in terms of exports draws its fundamental strength on the fact that you have the intellectual property yourself. If you are ever doing anything on technology transfers, you never have a permission to export, because whosoever gives you a TOT also gives you a region, geography in which you can sell. You cannot sell beyond. So the story when we talk of defense exports actually means that you have whatever you are exporting is completely on your own know-how and knowledge. Without that, you can't really export. Do something at somebody else's, call it technology, then it's only a part sale. But beyond part sale, like Amit talked about, like so many of us who keep exporting, India's first weapon system export happened in 2011, which was Larsen Toubro supplying to one, what Prime Minister keeps talking as the Far East and Look East and Act East. So some of the countries, it was decided that we need to be empowering them on the anti-submarine warfare on the naval side, and that's exactly where the first export began. So I'm going to be taking you through where does this IP come in. Before you get into defense, it is important because the history of this country, we heard that till 1700, we used to be contributing to 25% of the global GDP. And then you compare an India of today, we are nowhere. But from that, for the emergence of Bharat, it becomes important to know some part of that history. 1960s was the early phase in which the scientific minds, like Subbarao, some of them actually started creating what is known as the BARC, or call it the nuclear sciences, developing power or getting energy out of an atom. The first sector was nuclear, leverage to do what happened in space. And you remember that those days, if one reads a bit of history, Dr. Bhabha and Dr. Sarabhai used to be part of the same NPC and the same DAE, not NPC. And from there on, Kalam happened to be a chela of Dr. Dhawan. And this is exactly the legacy that continues in terms of building that Atmanirbhar solutions. And that's the reason my first slide, I think you need to do it from there. The laptop is too far. Okay. So I didn't pick up a slide on the nuclear, but let me tell you, suffices that Larsen Toubro founded by two Danish engineers, but the third engineer onwards happened to be Indian. And Atmanirbhar for Larsen Toubro began in 1939. Because the World War started, the Danes couldn't go back, Indian engineers came in, and then the design and build began in India. Now, this is exactly what took us to being partner to Dr. Bhabha. This is exactly what took us to becoming partners to ISRO in the space program. ISRO founded in 1969 took Larsen Toubro as a partner in 71, and the entire chain of what we see as launch vehicles has been made in our factories in Mumbai. From there, one starts looking at what actually what actually happened is that we became completely self-reliant, not because of choice. It was thrust upon us because every advanced world said we will not give something to India. We were under sanctions. Post Buddha smiled, we were under sanctions for literally till 2008. Companies like us could not import anything, and notwithstanding, we emerged and became big as companies, as well as along with that, India grew. So when we start looking at what ISRO's today's big successes are, drawing on what Subbarao talked of, 434 satellites we launched. We are completely Atmanirbhar on technologies. And of that, 353 satellites we have launched for friendly nations, those who are good to us, whom we want to help, whom we want to trust. And that's exactly where it is. Now, going from there, if one starts looking at Akash, do hard. If we look at defense sector, Larsen Toubro entered defense sector in 1985, 40 years in defense today. But over those 40 years, if I look at my first 17 years of existence in defense, we were not allowed to produce. We were only allowed to do R&D. Now, what does this do and what did it do to the country? Till 2001, the next slide, Akash. World War II, the Britishers were using Larsen Toubro. Britishers were using Mahindras, Britishers were using Tatas. Independent India, under whatever the pseudo philosophy, it was decided we don't need private sector. This opening came in, and I must remind everybody sitting here in a World Hindu Economic Forum, it was Vajpayee government who actually opened. It was not ever the Gandhi Nehru family who ever could think of doing anything positive for the country. So this is exactly where you see it began during that regime, and it truly opened up in 2014. Amit talked about that 2014. It opened, did amazingly well. So lots of things happened. And I have only 5 20-year phases of this period, 47 to 60. Can you imagine India was designing fighters? And it was happening in HAL. Absolutely, Marut. Nats we brought in, we made Ajit out of it. We were designing Maruts. And from there, we went on down and down and down and down to an extent of what was happening in India, we needed a transfer of technology. From that to 60 to 80 phase, license Raj. Everything was licensed. Every technology was brought in. Ordnance factories were created. Nationalization of private companies was getting done. So anything on entrepreneurship was killed by the government, and this is exactly what part of our own history in terms of the country. From there, you start saying now creation of Indian R&D, and this is exactly the birth of Dr. Kalam in defense in 1982. And that point onwards, you see lots of things I may actually changed, and today we are in that top list of 23, 24 countries, 25, we are number 3 as of 2022 in terms of export. So from a largest importer, which is what the next slide will show you, we today have a sector which has roughly 14,000 people who do defense production in India. And this is exactly where the exports happen. Now the slide is very interesting. Till 98, when the happened, if you were to look at, India never ever exported big time. 2000, 2001, we became the largest importer. And that largest importer tag remained with India in spite of 10 years of Modi regime. The backlog of what all was supposed to have been done and kept on getting created and completed Fact remains that our import values came down. Our indigenous effort dramatically went up, but we are still the largest importer in the world, and hopefully 2024-25 will actually start showing we would have completely changed. Scenario in 2001, when the markets were opened up, was we were not allowed to export anything. 2010 came after the global meltdown. 2010, the government of that day said you can export, but export only non-lethal stuff. That means they said you can export anything that does not fit into anything called a weapon. You want to sell a nut and a bolt which goes into a defense equipment, that's fine. You can only sell nuts and bolts. 2016, it was Manohar Parrikar, long live his memory. His last day is just an anniversary today. He is the one who actually created the defense export guidelines. So the history to India's defense export actually is a creation of people like Parrikar, who had seen it right from IIT days, what exactly happens. He created the first defense export opportunities for industry, and then was created a process by which today, if any one of us, Amiji or me, if we want anything to be exported, within 2 weeks, you get an approval. This time, earlier days, used to be months and months and months. No customer waits for you for months. So obviously, if you take your own time of approval for months, you will be told you're not required. They would buy from somebody else. Now, if one looks at where exactly is the market scenario, from 2014 to today, the overall defense budget, if one looks at the capital budget part of it, was 72,000 crores. It is today 172,000 crores, the capex part. This, if I convert, is roughly about 0.7% of India's GDP. Now, of that 170,000 crores, 127, exchange the 7 and 2, 127,000 crores is indigenous production today. Now, imagine 70% of it coming from Indian factories as Indian stuff, because there will be still some imports in that 127. Roughly 95,000 crore actually becomes what you are making in the country. Multiply it with the economic multiplier of 6. You actually are creating more than the defense budget of this country. So the scenario in terms of economics, and Nachiketa ji, you talked about this point, the scenario of this country is, because we create, as Indian minds, enormous amount of value, and the whole sort of supply chain and the economic multiplier starts happening in the country. The more you do defense in terms of capital, not in revenue, the more you actually get out in the form of GDP, in terms of GDP you put into the country to where it comes in. Now the CAGR obviously is roughly somewhere around 8%, too little, and this is exactly where you ask anybody who knows little more about defense, every year people keep saying, increase your defense expenditure, increase your defense expenditure, increase your defense expenditure. We have one of the worst enemies around, and there's a string of pearls around with so many other countries who will want to support some of those powers. Given that, unless we do this, and this becomes a, let me use a private sector word, a profitable business. Put in 1 rupee and you get more than 1 rupee. And that's exactly what is the game about defense in terms of manufacturing. What you manufacture with your own know-how, knowledge, you export. Now here comes export. In that 73,000 crores, which was 2014 entire defense capital spend, indigenous part was 44. Now I take roughly 28 to 30,000 crore of import. Now take it to 160 to 127 is something similar. 35,000 crore we import, which is just about 20%. 80% today of needs we produce within the country. Of that, now look at the export side. On the right, you actually notice that the private sector is the one who's a 20% player. You notice there, from 2019 to 2023-24, the private sector's contribution in terms of total defense production in India is roughly 20%. But 20% we sell here, but we sell far more in terms of exports. It was 88, 89%. Currently, it is roughly about two-thirds, which comes out of private sector. Now, does private sector not have IP? If private sector didn't have IP, he won't do exports. So this is exactly a mindset change. All of us who are thinkers need to be pushing on the government, because the bureaucracy does not let what Amitji talked about, the public-private equal level playing field. Even today, much more can actually be done within the country. Now we see 62% exports last year and 21% in India. Not a fair game. I'll stop wherever you stop me, because I have a lot more.
Maybe one or two more minutes.
Sure. Obviously, this is on the growth path. That 127 number you saw on the last slide, you're actually going to be doing 3 lakh crores in next exactly 5 years. Now look at the growth from 127 to 300,000 crores. There are 509 items which you can never import in this country. The negative lists, they are called positive indigenization lists, brought in by the Modi government. You have 6.5 lakh crores of future acquisition. 92% of future acquisition will happen within India. It will not be imported. Now that's a contribution of what this government has been doing. Corpus of 1 lakh crore. You want R&D fund? Take it. Return me after 50 years. That's what the government has said. And obviously, the processes which they are forming to start giving this money on a negligible rate of interest. Technology Development Fund, any startup can come up, take TDF, take IDEX in the next part, up to 25 crore, up to 50 crore. Government is willing to give money to start small industries who want to do innovation. Now, this is something which was unthinkable till 2014. It was unthinkable in 2016, but happened during Parikar's time. Positive push towards indigenous design, strategic autonomy. The thinking of strategic autonomy started coming in now, and this autonomy meant if you want to push a trigger on your gun, the gun must function. If the gun is not going to function, by the time you push a trigger and the enemy hears that noise, he will kill you. Now the scenario is, if you have imported weapon, let me assure you, the trigger will never get pulled. If you pull a trigger, it will never fire. And that's the power of semiconductor. The semiconductor behind will ensure if it is imported, it will not do your job. And that's where the autonomy and that's where the IDDM becomes extremely important. Today, 92% of the acquisition sitting in Indian basket for future has a lot to do with this strategic thinking which has started changing in the country. I'll stop in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to flash through what all are those big stuff that India today has the ability to do, has developed these products over years, and they can be exported. Now, whether you talk of tanks, whether you talk of helicopters, whether you talk of warships, from aircraft carrier to frigates to destroyers to SW corvettes, all of it today happens within the country. Same is the scenario of multiple weapon systems, different kinds. You will see in one of the slides, Abhijit's gun, the gun system on the top that you see. Second from the top right. All kind of weapon systems are happening today within the country. None of them get imported today. Complete system of systems, full-fledged, right from surveillance to shootout. Everything that can be done in the country, all kind of sensors, all kind of logistic equipment today has been designed and built in the country, and they're being sold. All kind of vehicles. Gone are the days we used to have Shaktiman. All of us would have seen, those who are into their 50s and 60s would have seen a Shaktiman on the road someday. Today everything is indigenous. You start seeing all kind of systems, complete command control systems happening within the country. And full-fledged autonomy, entire warship can be operated from a room 1/8 of this size, and you have everything centralized. And that is essentially where the new capabilities in the government is coming in. Obviously, those capabilities necessarily means if you have it, you can export. And this is where the 24,000 crores of export that we today talk about is just a tip of the iceberg. Because with these kind of capabilities and more happening, the scenario today for us is dedicated promotion council is exactly what we need. Now to leverage from this 24,000 crore, till the time government control, the bureaucrat control the export, it will not happen. And this is exactly why 1 year back, Prime Minister Modi himself gave instructions, create a defense export promotion council. So as an export promotion council sitting right at top, multiple things can be done by a whole lot of us to create what is Bharat's defense global. And obviously, if we look at in terms of going forward, what all we can sell, state-of-the-art stuff, right from air defense to artillery to varieties of things in India, from land, from naval, any of those domains. And of course, what the recent wars have taught us is all unmanned. I will not continue. I have a couple of more slides, but I'll stop here because the entire unmanned portfolio is something which India excels in. Do we sell them? We don't. Does our armed forces buy them? Not yet. Now that's essentially where you need a war. What happened in Israel or what happened in today other places to actually start seeing how exactly the unmanned systems today are deciding how the war will happen and not in the form of what you will do. Obviously, towards that, there's a lot much more in terms of levering to do on Quad, on the AUKUS, on obviously Act East, Look East, and those kind of things. I'll stop there. I'll not continue. I'll just skip through. That's it. Thank you.